summer of 2001, my brother Gideon and I decided to do our first real documentary in a way after coming out from NYU. The idea was to follow a young rookie firefighter during what is called his probationary period.
Who they are, what they do, what they eat, but especially when they go into a building on fire to save people, how do they do that? We would wake up in the morning, we would rush to the firehouse with our cameras, and then we would start filming, and we would film everything.
On September 11 in the morning, we're at the end of a 24-hour shift.
And during that night, not much happened, except early in the morning, around 6:37, the alarm went on.
We receive a call, kind of routine odor of gas a few blocks away from the firehouse, and we decided to go.
And so they all went, except for me, because I stayed with this rookie firefighter, Tony.
My brother's assignment as the lead cameraman was to follow Tony, the probie, at all time. Wherever he would go, whether it was in the truck, Gideon would follow him. For me, it was to follow the battalion chief.
Here we are, Jules with one camera, following all the firefighters, and me staying in the firehouse with my camera, staying with the young rookie, Tony, that we were following. And nothing is happening. We're just waiting for the guys and for Jules to come back.
We drive for a couple of minutes. We arrive a few blocks from the firehouse, and there is a slight odor of gas, and the firefighters are milling around. I'm filming them, very cliche shots from the World Trade Center to the firefighters. Suddenly, we hear this loud roar. And I remember as I'm holding my camera just at waist level, kind of look up, and then I see a plane in between two buildings going very fast. I just turned my camera to see where it was going to go, and that's where it crashes into the North Tower.
We hear a huge bang on the door of the firehouse, saying that a plane, a small plane, just hit the World Trade Center. Tony and I just rushed to the corner of the street, and it was there very apparent that there was a gigantic hole, a smoking hole in the North Tower.
I'm brought back to reality a couple of milliseconds later by the firefighters jumping into their trucks, and Chief Pfeiffer running to his car. So I get into the back of his car, as I normally do, and here we are on our way to the North Tower.
What am I doing on this? Go to the Trade Center. I know,
Tony quickly realized that he couldn't just rush there. He was, after all, the only firefighter left in the firehouse. Very quickly, he switched on the television. Here it was, live. We both fixated our eyes on the TV, and we're looking at this gigantic hole in the North Tower, and we're alone in the firehouse, and he doesn't know what to do, and he keeps swearing, and I'm so worried because I'm looking at the pictures. I have no idea where Jules is. You could be actually inside it. You could be in the other tower. The phone were not working.
We arrived right underneath the awning of the North Tower. They put their gear on. Chief Pfeiffer puts his gear, and I ask him, Chief, can I come in with you? And he looks at me and he said, yes, but you do not leave my sight. We go in the building. The scene is a little bit chaotic. An incredible amount of firefighters coming in, 5 at a time, 10 at a time, non-stop. I'm surrounded by hundreds of modern-day superheroes. They don't have a cape or a Captain America shield, but, firefighters in bunker gears is as close you can get in real life. And a firefighter from our company comes in and said, a second plane just hit the other tower. It's no longer an accident. It's an attack. For me, I try to hide that stress and that fear by just concentrating on filming everything I can see. And thousands of people going down the stairs, leaving the building, and here are these incredible people going up. The idea is all the firefighters have to go up, get to the fire floors, prevent it from continuing to spread down, try to go through the fire floors to get to the people above and try to save them. I see Father Judge, and Father Judge, you have to understand, is this almost mythical person. He's beloved by the entire fire department. He was always laughing. He always make you laugh. It was very contagious. And if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans for tomorrow. That was his favorite thing to say. But that morning, I don't see that personality, that smile, that outreach to quick with a joke and all that. I see his face is almost ashen, and I'm still filming. I'm convinced my brother has went up with the rookie Tony and with the guys, and so that's why I'm not concerned. I don't see him, but that's normal. At fire scenes, we normally are not together. Suddenly, we hear this horrible sound. You can only describe it almost as a freight train of death coming towards you at full speed.
Basically, the South Tower collapsed.
It's very strange. I remember thinking, being a sense of being very at peace, very calm, incredibly sad that I was going to die and leave the people I love behind.
And then you're thinking, what about my brother? I mean, was he in that tower? Is he alive? And so
the sound suddenly stops. You can't breathe. We don't know what's happening, but there's dust or smoke, or I don't know what it is.
Everybody all right?
Yeah, I'm okay.
How's the way out of here?
we rush the pickup truck going downtown. It feels completely eerie because the streets are completely covered with this kind of strange white powder.
And then I hear voices, and it's okay, I'm not dead. And turn on the floodlight on top of my camera, and I hear, you with the light, come downstairs, come help us. And I see Chief Pfeiffer. There's a few people around, a silhouette on the floor, and that's where I realize it's Father Judge, who had died. That morning, the difference between life and death was seconds and inches. Whether you ran fast enough or not fast enough, or whether you were here or literally just here.
We arrive there, walk toward the North Tower, because that's the only place we were thinking that the firefighters must be and Jules must be. And as you walk, your head goes a little bit always a little bit higher. I'm filming people just coming out of the towers.
Chief Pfeiffer said, okay, we're right at the foot of a footbridge that connects the financial center on the other side of the street. And so we're going to go there. We come out underneath that footbridge on the other side of West Street, right outside the financial center, and there is this ash everywhere. And I look up and I see my tower. North Tower is intact. It's burning, of course, but I don't see the South Tower. And the crazy part is, not for 1 second do I think it's collapsed, even though I'm filming what I would discover later, pieces of the building. But in my mind, it's no. My mind almost lies to me. It's no, it must be behind the smoke. It must be behind them. The angle is not right. I'm refusing to understand that. And people are just regrouping and following Chief Pfeiffer. And as he calls me and said, okay, we have to go back in. Tower still is intact, but we still have people in there. Let's go back in. And right at the moment, I think we're about to take 2-3 steps in the direction of the North Tower, which is about 50 to 60 feet here. We hear that same roar.
And then you hear this noise again, but this time it's so much closer. It's coming from up there, and you look again. You're seeing it in slow motion. You see this tower falling, and you're at the bottom of it.
And I see this mushroom. It's the tower collapsing.
And then your body is taking over and is literally making you run to the nearest vehicle.
I see a fire truck and an ambulance, and I decide to jump in between, put my camera down, and wait.
I remember my hand literally opening the door. I remember my body getting into it. I remember someone jumping in next to me.
I feel someone jump on top of me. Debris starts falling. The dust starts going all over us and starts to choke us.
counting the second, waiting for the big piece to literally land on the engine and completely flatten you. You can feel the engine shake, and
Suddenly everything stops.
I'm alive. And
Person on top of me gets up and says, "Okay, are you okay?" And I realize it's Chief Pfeiffer. Saved my life once again, countless times that day. But suddenly the wind just blows all of that dust away, and we're left with looks like a crater almost, but it's an inverted crater. It's a crater that goes up. It's a mound of I don't know what, but there's no more building. That's the moment I stop filming because I can't. I can't anymore.
the moment we open the door, it's like pitch black. You have this weird snow. You can see fires on your left and on your right. It's basically cars kind of burning.
I would spend then the next about hour walking down the streets around the World Trade Center, asking every firefighter I know if they've seen anyone from 7 and 1, and a little French guy with a camera.
I managed to return to the firehouse. When I arrived at the firehouse, there is no firefighters, and especially there is no Jules. You just don't want to think about the worst. You also think about your parents. I call them and they don't answer the phone, but I leave a message and I lie to my own parents. And I said, we're fine, we're good, no problem. When I hang up, that's when I really worried because I don't know if Jules is alive. Now I wait. The first people who comes back are the firefighters, and they are completely white from head to toe. Most of them can barely walk. And minutes pass, and half hours passed, and then suddenly, here he is.
I go in, and almost the first person I see is Gideon, is my brother. He looks horrible, I think just like me, he's covered, but he's alive. He's alive.
For everybody who has a brother and sister, I don't care how much you hate them, I can tell you that in those moments, you're just so happy to see them. Everything would change, not just in this firehouse, but in our lives also, and in the lives of every New Yorkers and people around the world.
When I think about that day, I've seen the best of what human beings are capable of. The firefighters who, going up 100 flights of stairs with 50 to 80 pounds on their back, knowing they might not make it. And also the civilians. Can you imagine complete strangers carrying each other down 80 flights of stairs, people they have never met in their life? After that, you had that sense of community, that sense of resilience in the darkest of night, that you see the most beautiful light, but it is true, I saw it. The best of human nature rises to the surface, always. It restored my faith in humanity.
I'm a ferry boat captain at New York Waterway. I didn't know I was going to be a ferry boat captain. When I was in high school, I signed up to join the Navy as soon as I graduated. I did 4 years active duty right out of high school. I was on a Navy tugboat out in Pearl Harbor. So I was able to take a test for my captain's license, which I passed. And then I wound up on ferry boats. And this ferry boat company, New York Waterway, it runs between New Jersey and New York. On the morning of September 11th, 2001, I was doing my normal routine, which was driving the ferry boat from Weehawken, New Jersey, across the river to Midtown Manhattan, West 39th Street. We continued to do runs until we saw the second plane. That one we saw impact the tower because all of our attention was on the burning towers. Luckily for me, I had just dropped off a load of passengers in Manhattan, and we were coming back to get another load of people from New Jersey, but there was nobody on the boat except me and my 3 crew members. I took the initiative to just take the boat out of service and head downtown at full speed. My crew was, of course, they said, "What are we going to do when we get there?" I said, "Well, we're going to help." Every time I come down to this section of the harbor, it brings back a lot of memories. This was the place where all the rescues were being facilitated on 9/11. A lot of people just trapped along this waterfront seawall, this fixed rail, all the way down this waterfront As far as you could see, everybody was leaving all the buildings here. You know, a massive crowd here, trapped, just pushing, and there's no place else to go. Then we nosed the boat up to this very area. People just climbed over this rail, jumping onto the boat, 400, 500 people. And we used the loudspeaker and we said, "We're coming back for you. Don't panic. We're coming back. We will be back for you." And we spun the boat around. But as we were transiting towards New Jersey, and everybody's screaming, I have 500 people packed into the boat. Everybody pulled life jackets out from underneath the seats and were putting on these bright orange life jackets, hanging on to them. And they were just all on their cell phones or screaming or pointing. And it was just, a million different emotions. I heard one voice in the back of the boat, some guy say, "I think they're going to collapse." And unfortunately, within about 30 seconds of somebody just saying, "I think they're going to collapse," the first tower did collapse. I mean, if you're a human and you saw this, watching it on TV is one thing, but seeing it with your own eyes, knowing that there's thousands of people in the building, around the building, first responders going up the stairs as people are trying to go down the stairs, you knew that it was catastrophic. And you knew that thousands of people's lives had just winked out in a flash. I made a quick sign of the cross, said a quick prayer, and then I raced over to the Jersey side and I unloaded the boat. We got everybody off as quick as we could. And people were saying, "What are you guys going to do now?" We said, "We're going back in. There's more people that need to come out of there." We were driving the boat through this black pall of smoke, and it was impenetrable. You could taste it on the tip of your tongue. It got into your eyes. It coated the entire boat with this fine ash. Then the Coast Guard put out a call for all available boats. They realized that they had to evacuate Manhattan basically by boat because the tunnels were closed. There's no car traffic allowed. There's no bus traffic allowed in. Boats are just coming in at different angles, different course, different speed. Somehow we got through that. You could hear people on the shoreline. You could hear sirens, cars. We got to Pier 11, and there was thousands of people lined up for as far as you could see. We started to load people there. We were just about to leave the dock, and the second tower collapsed. You saw the worst in humanity, but then you saw the best in humanity. That the police cars driving in and out of that smoke cloud, the fire department that sacrificed 343 firemen, all the people that died that day. And some of them died helping each other. They didn't just trample each other or push each other out of the way. They were people who stayed in the buildings, directing traffic, who could have saved themselves, and they didn't. They stayed there helping their fellow human beings. My boat did about 20 trips that day with about 400 people on average, and we did that all day long. I saw so many other boats stepping up and doing the same thing. They weren't superheroes. They were just regular people doing their job, and I'm proud to count myself among them.
I'm a retiree of the FDNY. I worked for EMS for 30 years, and then the last decade, or almost decade, I worked in headquarters for the fire commissioner. I loved serving the community. I loved being on the ambulance. I loved treating patients. So I'll probably describe 9/11 like most other people. It was a beautiful day. I reported for duty at Fort Totten in Queens, which is where the EMS Academy is. One of the fire officers came rushing into the office and said, "What's going on at the World Trade Center? They're calling for every ambulance that we have." We thought that didn't make any sense. One of us said, "Oh, we should turn on the TV. If it's something big that requires every ambulance we have, it's going to be on TV." So we turned the TV on, and it was the same scene that you see over and over again. It was that first gaping hole with smoke coming out of it. The newscaster was saying how it must have been a small plane. But from the perspective of the camera, you could see it wasn't a small plane. It was very confusing. the narrative didn't match what you were looking at. As we were debating back and forth what this could possibly be, the second plane goes in, and you could see very clearly the size of plane and how intentional it was. I responded to the bombing of the World Trade Center in 1993. We learned a lot about the World Trade Center and responding to an emergency of that magnitude. So when the second plane went into the building, I called our equipment manager on the phone. I told him, you need to get every oxygen tank we have, because that's what we needed the most in 93 was oxygen. And every flashlight that we owned, because that was also what we needed in 93. We had no reason to believe that this would be different, although it was ultimately very different. The entire academy was mobilized, which was all the classes that were in session, and we loaded up everybody into the 2 city buses, every ambulance that we had, and every marked vehicle that we had, and we were a caravan from Fort Taunton to Manhattan. We were monitoring the radio frequencies. We suddenly heard the chief of EMS at the time calling an emergency, that they were being buried by debris, and then the radios went silent. It was hard to wrap our brain around the fact that the tower was collapsing. The dispatcher kept calling for anybody to answer the radio that was at the World Trade Center site, and nobody came up on the air. It was pretty frightening. As we moved closer to the World Trade Center site, the second tower came down, and we were engulfed by the debris. We were still inside the city bus, so of course the driver had to stop moving. Couldn't even tell you how long it took for the debris to stop coming down and then for the dust to start settling enough for us to be able to even see. Once we were able to open the doors, though, we did start filing out and walking towards the World Trade Center, not knowing that truly both of these buildings had come down. Once we found the command post, the 30, 40 of us who came in that one bus started getting different jobs and responsibilities. About an hour into that, we were suddenly told to stop. It was realized by the people who were on the pile initially that the number of survivors that we were preparing for weren't going to be found right away, if at all. You didn't have a true sense of how bad it was. We spent the next 3 weeks working that sector. The streets were lined with people just waiting for us to come in and out of the site and cheering us on and waving. In all the years that I was in EMS, I was never thanked the way I was in those weeks after 9/11. If people saw me in uniform, even if I was driving by in uniform and they spotted me, they'd start waving and saying thank you. The schools had the kids writing thank you notes. It was a very healing part of a very difficult time. No matter how many times I see this ambulance, I always have an emotional reaction to it. There were actually 8 members of EMS who were killed on 9/11. 2 of them belonged to the FDNY, and the other 6 are various other EMS agencies. It's an inanimate object, but I want to cry. Just all that damage shows the extent of damage that occurred that day. About a year ago, I was speaking to a class of EMS recruits. One of the students asked me, when did everything go back to normal? I couldn't answer right away, but I finally realized that it never went back to normal. It became a new normal. 9/11 is it's like a line of demarcation that separates life into before 9/11 and after 9/11. The first time that I find myself dealing with the consequences of 9/11 was my sinuses. I had this perpetual sinus headache that was sometimes debilitating to the point of being able to do nothing. And And so that was my first 9/11 diagnosis. In 2019, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer, and now all of the women's cancers, women's reproductive cancers, are covered by 9/11, by the 9/11 health program. But I am in remission. Not everyone who survived or responded to the World Trade Center is able to talk about it. You've seen in this interview, there have been a few times where it's difficult for me, and I don't like it. Truthfully, I don't want to be here talking about this. But I think that for the generations behind me who never experienced this, all you can do is glean from our experiences what it was like. That's what never forget means to me.
On 9/11, I was at the United States Military Academy at West Point. I was in a Native American literature class, and class just got out. As I left class, I noticed there was something different. There was something off. Hearing my roommate, Joe Peppers, kind of shout down the hallway, Quinny, the World Trade Center's on fire. Those words sort of changed my life, forever. I went into my room and turned the TV on, 2 towers with smoke coming out. At first, my instinct wasn't that bad. Then my mother called me, said, "Oh my goodness, we're going to be at war. My son's at West Point," not even thinking about, the safety of my brother Jimmy. My brother Jimmy just graduated Manhattan College a year before. He was the kindest person. All we have are pictures now, and every single picture you see my brother Jimmy in, he has his arm around someone. He packed so much living into 23 short years. He was just such a bright light. He got his first job at Cantor Fitzgerald, and he was at the 102nd floor of the North Tower. And although the North Tower was hit first, it was the last tower to fall sort of 90 minutes later. Watching the North Tower fall, I sort of collapsed and fell with it, onto the floor, because you just kind of knew, seeing that visual, he died in that instant. Your brain sort of was telling you that he's gone, but your heart was holding out that somehow he got out and made it. So I made my way home to Brooklyn. Cantor Fitzgerald had an event later that day that we attended, and the CEO, Harry Lutnick, basically told everyone that nobody got out. My brother perished with 650 plus of his coworkers from the North Tower of the World Trade Center. I told myself I wasn't going back to West Point until my dad said, get your behind in the car. I'm taking you, back to West Point. I just remember one night, there's this kind of famous Patton statue at West Point by the library, and just sort of saying to myself that you could just sort of give up and go home and or graduate and go into the military and perhaps be part of something that'll respond to what happened that day. If we're guaranteed anything in life, is that you'll be given adversity. It's guaranteed to happen. You're going to get knocked down, but how do you respond to that? I ended up, graduating West Point. My roommate and I would go on to deploy, 7 times in about 6 years. After graduating West Point in June of 2002, that very same day I was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. My home station would be Fort Sill, Oklahoma, where I met Melanie Graham. She was the general's daughter, and we ended up dating. She lost her oldest brother, Jeff, to an IED in Iraq, who was operating, a mere, 2 clicks or 2 miles or so from where I was operating in Iraq. So we were able to sort of bond over our shared losses. After getting out of the Army, after my second tour in Iraq, I would deal with sort of my own sort of post-traumatic stress and guilt and shame around tied to not being able to save my brother, but then compounded by soldiers dying and classmates and friends dying, and my brother-in-law, being killed, that they wouldn't have if it wasn't for my brother being killed, and getting help for that. Talking to a professional, and that led me to a nonprofit path for about 8 to 10 years, where I eventually became the executive director of an organization called Headstrong that provides free mental health treatment for veterans dealing with PTSD. It started sort of unnumbing me, if you will, from those emotions that were sort of cut off post 9/11, to kind of see colors again, and see life again. As far as my personal life is concerned, we have 3 kids. Beckett Lee Quinn is our oldest daughter. She's 7 years old. Our middle son, Graham James Quinn, who's named after his uncles, and our youngest daughter, Cassidy. Life is complete chaos, and we love every minute of it. And we just strongly feel that if you're able to persevere, if you're able to ask for help and receive that help, you could get to a better place. 9/11 was the worst day of my life. But in some regards, 9/12 and 9/13 and 9/14 were some of the best days of my life, because we were never more united, and hopefully we could take something from that for our own lives.